So next we're going to move over to the state court side. So with the state court system, we also do have a little diagram that I think helps to explain how the court system works for the state. So at the lowest level, we have the local trial courts. The local trial courts, that would be like a Guilderland Town Court or an Albany City Court. Okay? And we'll talk about what goes on in each court in a minute. Then we have the second level is the general trial courts. Majority of cases are heard at the general trial court level. Then we have the special courts. This would be like juvie court, maybe family court, things like that. Divorce court might be here. Then we have, again, here at the state court level, we have the intermediate or appellate courts. Same thing. There's going to be an appellate level. Those three court levels, the special trial, the special courts, the general trial courts, the local trial courts, if they have a case that they want to be appealed, they appeal it up to the appellate court in their jurisdiction. And then at the top, you have the state Supreme Court. Okay, now, getting to more detail on the state courts. At the lowest level, we have the local trial courts. These are courts with what we call limited jurisdiction. They're going to hear small, minor matters. Disputes over, like, small amounts of money or small, like, little, what we call petty larceny types of situations. So somebody steals a pair of jeans in Crossgates Mall. That's going to be heard in Guilderland Town Court. Somebody goes and maybe steals, I don't know, a $10,000 plasma TV. That's going to get heard in Albany County Court because it's a higher, more significant case, higher dollar amount. The kid who shot the gun off in in Crossgates, got tried or is being presented in Albany County Court, not in Guilderland Town Court. Okay. So more minor matters are at your trial court level. General trial courts, they hear both civil and criminal trials, which we'll talk about the distinction between those in just a little bit. But these are basically, there's generally one per county. Majority of the cases are heard at the general trial court level. And they are typically called the courts of general jurisdiction or original jurisdiction. This is where the original trial is heard. This is where all the evidence is presented. This is where all the witnesses are presented, etc. Special courts, they handle specialty matters such as juvenile situations, domestic relations situations. Those are examples, not the only things. Again, we have the intermediate appellate courts. They hear cases on appeal. Same thing as in the federal side. Only matters of law are argued. No new witnesses, no new evidence. They determine only if the law was applied correctly in a case. So if you sued somebody and you didn't like the decision that the courts came up with, you can apply to the intermediate appellate court and say, you have to have a point of law that you believe was misapplied. Your attorney would come up with what points of law were misapplied, and you would appeal the decision. And then you have the state Supreme Court, a highest level in a state. Typically speaking, like the U.S. Supreme Court, they'll decide which cases they want to listen to, usually the ones that have the most public impact, and then they'll listen to those cases. They can decide not to handle a case. And in New York State, I would like for you guys to make sure you circle this, because in New York State, our highest court is called the New York State Court of Appeals. Okay, and that's not typical. Okay, so ours is a little bit different name. Yes.
Okay, so like if intermediate appellate is like no new evidence and no new witnesses, like what is for new evidence and new witnesses?
The general trial courts.
Okay.
Right. So, and a trial is only heard once, okay? You know, typically speaking, unless there's a hung jury, if there's a hung jury, you know, it might be retried. But typically speaking, your case is heard, all the evidence, all the facts are presented for both sides, a decision is rendered. Once the decision is rendered, the sides can agree to go along with it, like, okay, yep, you know, so-and-so is going to go to jail and that's it. Or one of the sides can appeal the decision. If they decide to appeal it, they go up to the next highest court in their jurisdiction at the appellate level and they appeal it. They do not retry the whole thing. They do not hear witnesses. They do not hear new evidence, etc. The attorneys for both sides, they go up there and they stand before the three justices and they make their arguments. This is why I don't think the law was applied correctly. And then the other side, yes, it was applied correctly, and this is why it was applied correctly. So that's what they do. So it's just the attorneys getting there and arguing the law. That's it. Any other questions? Okay. Juvenile court. Again, this is one of those specialty court areas. Juvenile court, here's offenses relating to minors, people under the age of 18. We have three categories that we break our minors down into. First category is what we call a delinquent child. A delinquent child is a minor who has committed an adult type of crime. So maybe they've committed murder, maybe they've committed arson, adult types of crimes, bad stuff. Okay? Compared to an unruly child is a child or a minor who is not considered to have committed an adult crime, but they've done something wrong. So, for instance, maybe they've violated curfew in the local jurisdiction. Maybe they purchased tobacco products. Maybe they've purchased alcohol, things like that. They're unruly. Versus the lowest, the last level is a neglected or abused child. These would be children that are maybe homeless or destitute or without appropriate parental supervision. Typically, a child in this level, the neglected or abused child, if the courts are involved, oftentimes there's what we call a PINS petition, person in need of supervision, is issued by the courts, and that's where the court has people that are basically monitoring the child's situation. You know, the child might have to meet with a probation officer. They might have social workers coming to visit the house frequently, et cetera, et cetera. Not particularly a good situation, but trying to prevent the child from maybe becoming classified as an unruly or delinquent child. With the juvenile court system, the matters are not open to the public. They're confidential. They're what we call sealed to protect the minor's privacy. The courts are generally a little bit more informal. There's no jury. Typically, the minor is not released on bail. There's no bail involved. You know, there's no sense that they're per se going to flee. Okay, because they're usually, in some way, shape, or form, they're not, you know, typically speaking, somebody who's a minor can't just travel freely. You know, they don't have the means or the resources to go and travel freely. Okay, so that's why there's no sense that the bail is typically needed. And then the U.S. Supreme Court states that in order to prosecute a minor as an adult, you have to have beyond reasonable doubt to convict the child. So there are two types of court cases that we typically hear about. We have what we call criminal cases. And criminal cases, basically, The government represents us, the people, in those types of cases. So when you hear the state of New York versus John Bonanno, typically speaking, that's a criminal case that's being brought by the state of New York representing us, the rest of us, in a criminal proceeding against John, because John's committed some crime. Versus a civil trial where two parties are basically, one party is suing another party privately. So, for instance, John wants to sue Mrs. McGrath because I play loud music when I'm driving down the street and it's a violation of his rights to quiet enjoyment of his property. So John sues me, to either get me to stop playing my loud music or pay him some monetary compensation for the new hearing aids that he has to get, okay, because of my loud music. All right, so he's suing me civilly. In that case, it would be John Bonanno versus Mrs. McGrath. So I'm going to pause here and just let